Medical marvels. Basic building blocks number 2. Our learning intention this time is about cells. I will understand cells are the basic unit of living things. So if we have a look at this picture here, this is a very simplified diagram of the main bits inside a cell. So all life is made from tiny building blocks like this called cells. Now this is a picture of an animal cell, diagram of an animal cell, and it has certain features that allow me to see that it's an animal cell and not a plant cell, for example. And you'll have opportunity to research plant cells and also study them later on in the year. So let's have a look at this animal cell and have a look at the features that it has. So for a start, it's very small. There's no scale on here, but we could be talking a tenth of a millimeter, so or probably even smaller than that, tenth of a millimeter or smaller for an animal cell. You will see that surrounding the edge of the animal cell there is a cell membrane. This is really important for controlling what goes in and out of the cell. Inside there is a jelly-like substance. It's actually a mixture of many different things. Things that are too small to see with school microscopes, but we call this whole area cytoplasm, and it's where the reactions of the cell take place. You will see we've got these little pink blobs inside the cell. They're not pink in real life, but these are mitochondria. Mitochondria are a really important small area within the cell. It's called an organelle, so a very small compartment within the cell. The mitochondria is where cellular respiration takes place. That is where food molecules are actually broken down using oxygen to release the energy that cells need to survive. Here in the middle of the cell, quite a large organelle, quite a large compartment. It's called the nucleus. The nucleus is the organelle that contains all the DNA, the genetic material of the cell, and it's where all the instructions are held and where the cell can control what it makes and what it does and how it looks and what shape it is. All that information is stored inside the nucleus in here. So we're looking here at a cell. It's very small. You will have in you billions of cells like this. They will all contain the same genetic information, but they will have used different bits of that information to become the specialized cells that you see in different parts of your body. So if we were to look at an organ like a heart, you would see muscle cells, cardiac muscle cells, and they will be very different shape to cells that you might find in your blood because they have different jobs to do. And they will have inside them slightly different organelles because those different compartments in the cell will be doing different jobs to allow the cell to carry out different functions. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So mitochondria, where respiration happens and the energy is released from the food using oxygen. The nucleus, containing instructions for the DNA, for the cell coded in DNA. Cytoplasm, where all the cell reactions take place. And the cell membrane, controlling what enters and leaves the cell. So we have thought about what humans need to stay alive. And you remember that from the last video. Let's have a look at what cells need to stay alive. Now, they need oxygen and nutrients and water, and they also need to get rid of any wastes that they make and any carbon dioxide that they generate. Why do they need these things? So that they can carry out respiration. So inside the mitochondria, they release energy. So glucose from their food combines with oxygen to release carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Surely you should be thinking that this looks very similar, if not identical, to what humans need to survive. And that makes sense because humans are made up of building blocks called cells. Here is a much more complicated and slightly more accurate version of what is inside the cell. And you'll notice that there are the organelles we've already met, so nucleus, cell membrane, here it's called plasma membrane, it's the same thing, cytoplasm. In green here, we've got a mitochondrion. That's the singular for mitochondria, which is the plural. But you will notice that there are lots of other organelles that you can research and look up and find out the functions for. But in general, what we need in a cell or in a human is oxygen, and our respiratory system provides that to every single cell. We also need water and nutrients, and it's our digestive system that brings that towards every single cell in our body. And we need to get rid of wastes, carbon dioxide and wastes. Carbon dioxide is removed from our bodies by the respiratory system, and waste is removed by the excretory system. So let's have a look how one single cell can actually join together with lots of other cells to make something as complicated as a human. So you see at the top of this diagram, we have one single cell. When you have cells that are all doing the same job and they all look very similar and they all work together, they're called a tissue. And we have lots of different types of tissue in our body. So we've got some tissues here made up of round cells. We've got some more tissues here made up of sort of spiky cells. And we've got tissues made up here of cells with hairs on them. Different types of cells joining together to do a similar function. And when you bring more than one tissue type together, you can make organs. So a stomach here will have different layers of tissues making up some muscle cell, some excretory cells, all making up the stomach. Similarly, here's another organ, the kidneys, another organ, the heart, another organ, the lungs. So a cell joins together to make tissues. The tissues join together to make organs, and then we can bring all those organs together in different systems to make something as complicated as a multicellular organism. So if we were to put these in order from smallest to largest, if we started off with cells, what would come next? Let's have a look. Tissue, then organs, then organ systems, then organism. Let's have a look at an example here. We have a muscle cell. It's actually a smooth muscle cell. Lots of different muscle cells come together to make a tissue, and those tissues can form an organ, in this case the bladder. And the bladder is part of the excretory system, so it will work in conjunction with the kidneys and all the tubes that are joining them together. Now, cells can actually survive on their own, and there are things called single-celled unicellular life forms or unicellular organisms. So it is possible to live usually in water as one cell. And here are some examples. Number one is a paramecium. You can see that in pond water. You can see its little nucleus there and its cell membrane around the outside. It's got some organelles inside. We've got some algae, number 2 there, that's Euglena. Number 3 is an amoeba. Number 4 over here, this is green, it's Volvox. And number 5 up here is rotifer. That's a mobile, single-celled organism. So if we can have single-celled life, why isn't all life single-celled? Well, there are some disadvantages. So although a single cell can do all the jobs it needs to do to stay alive, if it gets damaged, the whole organism will die. There's nothing else that could take its place. It's one cell. If it dies, it's gone. That one cell also has to do every single job to stay alive. So if it's going to do every job, that's going to be very inefficient. And I mentioned they have to live in water. So single cells are very susceptible to drying out, and that limits where they can live on our planet. So we are multicelluled. We have many cells, and cells specialized to do individual jobs. This means that their shape fits their job really well. They can form tissues with other similar cells, and they can be really efficient at specializing in one job. And if one cell gets damaged, that's okay, because its neighbor can do its job for it. So you can see here that all the cells that start off in you as an undeveloped bundle of cells when you've just been made after fertilization, you can end up with lots of different types of tissues that can then work together in organs to make multicellular life. Much more efficient way of living.